Today we are in Parsha Behaalotecha, and we're going to speak about the manna, about the bread from heaven that came down to feed the Jewish people. So the Jewish people have had a long journey through the wilderness of history, moving from one country to another, and sometimes forced to move, sometimes by choice. And our people have come in contact with many other peoples and cultures. And we have had spiritual leaders, an unbroken chain of sages and teachers who have always done what they could to keep the connection, to preserve the Jewish identity and maintain contact with the Jewish people and with the Jewish teaching. And people maintain this contact at different levels and in different ways. Yet at the heart of it all, there is a Jewish essence. And this Jewish essence is the real key to a person's spiritual identity. So how do we stay connected to our essence? So one example is Shabbat, which is an example of an unchangeable essence. So for some people, Shabbat observance is very dedicated and all-encompassing. We prepare for Shabbat, we go into Shabbat, we keep the Shabbat. And for others, it seems minimal. Yet the power of Shabbat, however we connect to Shabbat, is that of like an infusion that goes to us in a long way. It's real to the core. And Shabbat, when we get really into it more and more, Shabbat becomes again the day of reflection, peace, and inspiration, which it can be, giving energy and a sense of purpose to the working days of the week. In this Parsha, the Torah is giving another example of a kind of essence. And this essence is the manna, which came from heaven, the miraculous food which sustained the Jewish people during their 40-year journey going throughout the wilderness. And the manna began appearing shortly after they left Egypt. And every weekday morning, they would gather the manna. And on Friday, the sixth day, there would be a double portion to gather. On Shabbat, the manna would not be found, but they had sufficient manna left from the double portion they collected on Friday. So every day they would take a portion for the day. Next morning, another portion for the day. But on Friday, they would take two portions. One they would eat on Friday and one they would have for Shabbat. On Shabbat, there was no other portion coming down. And this is actually the reason, and one of the reasons, that we have 2 loaves of bread on Shabbat, commemorating the double portion. Now, the manna taught us about trusting God, about knowing that the source of nourishment comes directly from God. Now, one thing was that every day a person had to trust that tomorrow God will give another portion of manna. So they didn't have left over at the end of the day. And that was teaching them to trust God. But knowing that the manna, and knowing that on Friday, the 2 manna day supply would come on Friday, was a teaching that the essence would feed them daily, and that the essence would feed them enough on Friday to last them through the Holy Shabbat day. So God was giving this as a teaching of faith. Faith that after they ate their daily meals from the manna that they had gathered, that they didn't have to concern themselves about the next day. They didn't have to worry about it, because it was a training and a teaching that the source of their nourishment was taking care of them every day. So Behaalotecha brings up the subject of manna actually for a second time. And what is it talking about? Actually, in this parsha, when it talks about Behaalotecha, it's talking about that the Jews complained that the fact that they had only manna to eat wasn't what they wanted. So although the manna was something spiritual and sacred, the people wanted other food. They wanted meat. Now, it's interesting that although some people complained about the manna, it was still there for them. So God continued to give them the manna. And for Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam, and many other Jews in the wilderness, the manna was something wondrous and holy. Yet there were other people who had a much more materialistic and simplistic view of it. They were kind of fed up with eating it every day, and they wanted a change. So what's interesting is that for some people, the manna seemed to them not good enough. That's interesting because manna was the perfect food. So what were they thinking? What was going on? But God nevertheless let them have what they wanted. They wanted meat, and God rained down quails on the people who wanted meat, and they had quails. But what was going on? Their demands and complaints lacked the gratitude and understanding that God was taking care of them. After the inundation of quails described in the Parsha, eventually everyone went back to eating the manna, which sustained them till they reached the Holy Land. So these people were complaining. They didn't, what do you need the manna for? We want quails, we want meat, and God gave them the meat. But everybody went back to eating the manna, and the miracle is that God gave the manna. A second miracle is God continued to give the manna, that God didn't give up on them. And so in the manna was the bread of heaven. It was also like the breath of heaven, that this was very refined, fine food, and God was giving them this food that they could eat that was completely heavenly. And this quality relates to the essence. It doesn't change or disappear even when it's eaten by somebody who complains against it. So the manna was miraculous. The manna, Shabbat, and Torah all have the quality of the essence. So this is important for us to know, that the manna, and we're going to talk about like, what does that do for us right now? Shabbat, which we all have and can strengthen, and the Torah. And on Shabbat, we have the 2 loaves of bread, which is a manna statement. We'll talk about this. They're all essence quality. That is who we really are and how we're really connected into God. And we have this choice to keep taking that. So these concepts help the Jew preserve our own essence through our own long journey through time, toward the time of the Mashiach, the Messiah, when the essence of goodness and holiness, instead of being hidden as now, will be revealed. So what do we learn from the manna? The manna was the perfect food. Nutritionally, it contained 0 waste or excess. It was 100% absorbed by the body, and those who subsisted on a strict diet of manna actually had no need to relieve themselves. It was the food that was so perfect that it went into every cell of their bodies in the most healthy way and just completely gave healthy nutrition, physically and spiritually. And spiritually, what was this? The manna was divine light made into matter. According to the Talmud, the manna's spiritual qualities had a profound effect on its eaters, and the Torah could only be given to manna eaters. Eating the manna enhanced their spiritual development and had an inner long-term influence. The manna looks like a small, round, white seed, say like coriander seed. It descended at night, sandwiched between two layers of dew, and it tasted like your favorite food. The manna miraculously had any taste which its eater desired. So since it produced no weight and was encapsulating its eater's nutritional needs so precisely that after the body absorbed what it needed, there was nothing left. Now, shortly after the manna started coming down, we received the Torah at Sinai. And for the next 4 decades, we traversed the desert, eating the manna and learning Torah. So the Midrash says, we mentioned it, that there's a direct correlation between our diet and our occupation, stating that the Torah could be given only to eaters of the manna. That's so interesting in terms of thinking about how we eat, that what we eat and how we eat makes a difference. We'll talk about that a little more. After 40 years of manna and Torah, we crossed the Jordan River into the Promised Land. And there, Torah study remained a full-time occupation for only the tribe of Levi and for select individuals from other tribes, and everyone else got down to the business of earning a living as farmers and merchants. And then the manna stopped, and we switched to bread from the earth. Instead of hamotzi lechem min hashamayim, it was hamotzi lechem min haaretz, which is the blessing we say when we eat bread. And that was like dusky, bulky, square bread, the kind whose nutrients and vitamins are packaged in disposable filler. And some of it gets digested and not absorbed. So digestion becomes a process. So we're in this parsha, the people are complaining. And what were the people complaining about? It says in the Torah, the children of Israel began to cry, and they said, "Who will feed us meat? We remember the fish that we ate in Egypt free of charge." Suddenly they're looking forward to going back to Egypt where they were killing their children. We remember the fish we ate in Egypt free of charge, the cucumbers, the watermelons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. But now our bodies are dried out, for there's nothing at all. We have nothing but manna to look at. It's interesting that they were complaining like this, that it's interesting that the manna did not taste like onions or garlic, because the Talmud said, so the oral Torah was saying that onion and garlics are not good for expecting women. So the garlic would not have anything in it that was dangerous for anybody. But they couldn't handle it. What if I want and it doesn't taste like, and that's what they were doing. They were basically having a tantrum that they wanted it. They wanted what they wanted. That's basically what it was. Even if what they wanted wasn't good for them. The Israelites received manna every day, but they wanted real meat. Why? So let's look at that for a moment. People are so used to dealing with waste that even when we're handed something that's 100% pure gold, we start taking it apart, looking for some problem to get rid of. That's the digestive process. People want perfection. And when it's perfection that we want, nothing is good enough, because only God is perfect. Nothing else in the world is perfect. So God is giving them the perfect food. And when people get into that perfectionism, then even perfect is not enough. And then what happens is that people look for the faults in the soul of a loved one, for hidden agendas in the most beautiful friendships, for the other side in the most righteous of causes. So they're looking for problems because they think there must be a problem. And even goodness itself is judged too good to be true. Oh, now what? People win the lottery. Oh, there's a problem. What are you going to do? Now everybody's going to want the money. And then, should we take the whole thing? Should we take it all at once? Should we tell people? We shouldn't tell anybody. And it becomes something where they look for problems instead of saying, okay, instead of 10% tzedakah, we're going to give 20% tzedakah. And then we're going to decide what to do with it. We're going to have an advisor. It's going to be a great gift. We're going to use it for good things. But when people get into this, everything is a problem, which is a kind of digestion. You're trying to take out the good from the bad and the bad from the good. And how do you do it? Then it doesn't work. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe said the Torah could only be given to eaters of manna because a nation of bread eaters would have immediately gone on a digestive process. Like they would have been told, love your fellow as yourself. They could have said, well, maybe that's okay. Maybe that's, nutritious. Okay, I guess we could do that. But keep the Shabbat? Oh, no, that's not practical for this day and age. And they would have started to separate the parts that appeal to them from the parts that didn't. So they wouldn't have been able to say, God, whatever you want me to do, that's what I'm going to do. Your Torah is perfect. We'll do it. We'll try to understand it later on, but we'll do it. That could only be with manna eaters who didn't have this digestive process looking for the bad and the good and the bad and the good, but just saying, God, we accept you. We accept what you want. So it's human nature never to be satisfied with a person's current possessions and achievements. So what does it mean that that's human nature? How could this be explained? If it's human nature, it's something that was put into us. Why would that be put into us? And the Mishnah says, quote, one who has 100 desires 200. Upon attaining 200, the person will crave 400. And this continues on and on and on. So God gave us this nature for a good reason. And its purpose is to keep us getting impelled to go forward in our spiritual quest, not allowing us to be content with spiritual heights we received yesterday. So instead of saying, okay, I learned this, that's enough, now I know enough. No, you don't know enough. You didn't do enough. We need to learn more, do more, develop more, work on connecting to God better, work on making the world better. And so it's not enough. There's more that each of us could do. And this same nature is also the spark which continuously drives scientists to find new discoveries and inventors to originate new inventions, which greatly improve our quality of life, leaving us with added time and energy to devote to serving God. And this inborn nature, though, has to find a positive outlet in a person's life. We need to use it for the good. It could be good. Why do we have a lot of svarim? So that we could say, maybe this one will help me. I need to look up this. I need to understand this, but I do have something exactly about this. And that will help me. I'll take it out and learn that. That will be good. And then I'll know how to go forward better. But if this quality is not used in a pursuit of positive and productive objectives, then it deteriorates into an insatiable and pointless desire for more and more luxury and wealth stuff. We need to know when to push forward for more and better. But when nothing is good enough, even the perfect heavenly manna which could taste like almost anything you like, almost anything you like. And then you feel like, well, that's not good enough. And that becomes a problem. So we need also to know that we need to have bread eaters who digest their food, because we need to know, to discern, to embrace the good and reject the bad, and to make moral choices. But we also need to know when to get out of the digestion mode. We need to be able to recognize when God bestows on us a gift that is purely good and perfection. We need to receive God's gift, knowing where it comes from. So we need to open ourselves to God's Torah and allow its totality to nourish us like the essential manna that He is. And God is taking care of each of His creations. God gave us the gift of the manna, the livelihood that we needed. So what about the manna that is not our obvious nourishment? Now, people get worried about their livelihood, and it says in Tehillim 121, Me'ayin yavo ezri, from where will my help come? And the next line of the Tehillim in 121 is that my help will come from God. My help will come from God. So this is something that we need to work on. We need to work on having this trust that God is helping us all the time. And this is something we have to work on. Faith and trust. Faith is it's in us, it's in our soul. We have to bring that faith, that emunah, down into reality to make it actually who we are. And then trust has to be something that's really in our guts, something that we say, I know God is taking care of me, and I know God will take care of me. And that's something that we need to work on. So how do we work on that? Now, God chose to sustain the Israelites in the desert with the manna, and He chooses to sustain each of us in different ways, like through our occupation. And it's all a divine miracle. Just the packaging is different. So we need to know that God is blessing us with miracles all the time and is giving us what is good for us and what we need, even though it might not seem like that. So this is something, in the desert, the manna, there were a lot of people that were worried, is it going to come down tomorrow? It came down today, but is it going to come down tomorrow? God did this for a reason. God could have said, just a second, I'm going to give you, everybody gets a little bag, and in the bag will be manna for 40 years. Don't worry about a thing. You got it in the bank. It's your manna. But that wouldn't teach them what God wanted to teach them. He wanted to teach them, I'm taking care of you every day, all the time. I'm giving you what you need now. And I want you to trust me that tomorrow I'm also going to give you what you need. So you could see that this is applicable to all of us right now. That God is taking care of me today, and I need to trust that God is taking care of me tomorrow and the next day, one day at a time. It's really interesting. Last night, I met a friend of ours, and he told me that when his first child got engaged, and he has a large family, Baruch Hashem, that he got really nervous, and he started crying. And that he just like found a quiet place and he was crying for about an hour. And what was he crying about? How is he going to make weddings for all these kids? And other people think, how are they going to pay for education for the kids? How are they going to, if this child needs braces, what if the other children are going to need braces? What if? But he said that after an hour of crying, he said, wait a minute. Nobody makes 4, 5, 6, 7 weddings at the same time. You make one at a time. So let's deal with one right now, and then we'll deal with one at a time. And thank God his children are all married, and he took care of what he needed to take care of. But when we project into the future and say, how's this all going to work out? Then we scare ourselves, and it becomes really hard because we project into the future the worry that, are we going to do this? And the answer is, God's going to help us. Well, what do you mean? Why do we have to do everything? God's going to help us. So we were saying that even when God brings money, however he brings money, it's all a divine miracle. So miraculously, his children are all married. And somebody else's children all got educated. And somebody else's children, all the ones who needed braces, got braces. But it's got to be one thing at a time, that we're trusting in God, that now is the time to take care of what's going on today, and then we're going to take care of what's going on tomorrow. So the Rebbe Maharash, who was the Shmuel of Lubavitch, he wrote a letter saying that a businessman has to integrate a level of trust, which he should do by visualizing his livelihood already waiting for him. That he should imagine when he goes to the trade show, that it's all going to work out. He's going to get what he needs. He's going to be able to buy it and bring it home. It's all going to work out. And if it delays, he doesn't find what he needs to know that God in his goodness will take care of him generously in a different way. Just needs to know, God's taking care of me. God's got this together. God has for me what he wants to give me, what he will give me, and I know that God's on top of this. So instead of worrying if there will be enough or if things will work out, we need to trust that God has taken care of us and will continue to take care of us. And we need to visualize that we will have good and blessings. But obviously, this is ongoing practice. We call this avodah. This is practice. Avodah also means prayer. So your child gets engaged and you say, please bless us. This should work out well and beautifully and in a peaceful way. And there should be plenty of whatever is needed for it to make it a beautiful event and a beautiful life for the kids together. So we can visualize that it's going to be good. Now, instead of worrying, will things work out? We're just trusting that God has taken care of us, will continue to take care of us, and visualize that we will have good and blessings. So even though we may not know exactly how the situation will work out, we need to trust that God is in charge. So there's a famous Hasidic statement, again from the Rebbe Maharash Shmuel, Tracht gut wird sein gut. Think good and it will be good. And how we think makes a difference in how situations turn out. When people say, oh, no, this is not good, this is not good, in a certain way, they cover their eyes to the good. They're not looking for the good. They're fearful that it's not going to be good, that it isn't good. And so they kind of think of the situation as terrible, and they don't want to or can't see anything different. But when you do tracht gut wird sein good, think good and it will be good, that changes the situation. A family in our community had a son who was very ill, and he was in the hospital for quite a while. People were very, very concerned. And the parents put a sign on the door: only come in if you're thinking positively. Tracht gut wird sein good. They didn't want negative energy. Tracht gut wird sein good. And their trust became obvious. And people walked in with a smile. Oh, so good to see you. How are you doing today? And their son was healed and went home. So instead of worrying, we need to develop our trust in Hashem. So the Rebbe Maharash, Rebbe Shmuel, once stated that even today, a Jew's livelihood falls like manna from heaven. And just as manna descended from our forefathers on God's initiative, regardless of their efforts, so too a person's livelihood descends from above. And while we must work to earn a living, we should never forget that our best efforts are only the medium through which God channels his blessings. We could see this in every area in our lives. We do our part, but God makes it reality. So what we do is just our part. What comes out of it is up to God, and it's God's blessing. How you get the job or build the business and its success all comes from God. Now, if our efforts are only a medium, so it's not the job that makes the money for us, it's God. Through the job, fine. There's no need to make our efforts excessive. So it's not a good idea to say, maybe I should work more and do 5 jobs so that I could earn more. Because that's not what we're supposed to be doing, because too much effort could be as unhelpful as too little. So, in other words, we do our part the best that we can and just leave it at that and trust that God is going to take care of us. Now, the manna was provided by God with minimal effort, and therefore it's called the bread from heaven. But we do find that the manna was affected by a person's status. For a righteous person, it was already bread, ready to eat. For the average, it was on their doorstep. Just reach out, take it in, ready to go, like an energy bar. And for an average person, it was further away, and they had to gather it. And for the wicked, it is still further away, and it needed to be prepared. So we need to know that God is giving to each of us, even though it seems that the income is from the job or the business, the income is from God. Now, when we eat food, there's a specific commandment in the Torah that after bread, that there's a prayer that we're supposed to say. And we say, the sages clarified everything, what the prayers would be. And we actually say a prayer before we eat and a prayer after we eat. So when we eat anything, we drink a cup of water, or we eat an apple, we eat whatever we eat. There are different blessings for different types of food. We're basically saying that everything is according to God's word, that everything that God is giving us is the fruitfulness that God is choosing to give us. this is also a practice that when we eat the food, that before we eat the food, that we should think, this is food that God is giving me. And say the blessing with consciousness, not just blah. Now, for people, there's levels and levels, that for people who are unaccustomed to saying the blessings, the Siddur has pages with blessings. This is for bread. This is for fruit. This is for vegetables. This is for wine. This is for bread and cake. And this is for everything else. And for some people, we need to open the prayer book and read the prayer and think about what it says. And even if we know the blessings and we're accustomed to saying the blessings, we maybe need to slow down so that we're really saying thank you to God for giving us the food, to recognize that it's not just food, I earned it, I cooked it, I got it. No, that the food has to be always manna, that God is giving us the food. And then we take it in and we eat it with the consciousness that God is nourishing us. And after we eat the food, we're thanking God for having given us the food. And we have to realize there's so much involved in this. To have a healthy digestive system, to have teeth that work, to know what is good for us. We have to be grateful for all of this. And we have to know that whatever God is giving us, God is taking care of us and that it's coming from God. So this is all a practice that we need to do. And this is, what is this really doing? It's giving us faith and trust. Thank you for giving me this food. Thank you for giving me a system that could digest this food. Thank you for taking care of me. So, some people, it's interesting that so the whole point of God giving us this manna was to instill trust in us. That was the purpose. And we need to work on that by saying, tracht gut wird sein gut, think good and it will be good. Some people write that down and they put it up someplace so they could look at it and they say, think good and it will be good. God is taking care of me. So this daily manna, need for manna, instilled in the Israelites this constant trust for God. And some people have a custom to recite the Torah portion describing the manna every day in order to express their trust that God sustains them daily. So it's not a custom that the Arizal said or mentioned. It wasn't mentioned in the Chabad Siddur, but the Rebbe that Tzemach Tzedek writes that it's advisable to say this portion at least occasionally. So we need to acknowledge that whatever we receive is a miracle. Stop looking for perfection. Look for the good that God is giving us. Be happy with everything that God is giving us. So this is something we have to work on doing. Someone gives us a gift, we have to appreciate it and enjoy it and say, thank you. It's so special. Thank you for thinking of me. And when we have a flower, oh, so beautiful to have a flower in this little vase. And my friend gave me this little vase. It's so beautiful. To be happy and appreciate everything as a miracle from God. So God is providing for people, and whether it seems like it's in a natural or a supernatural way, he's doing this daily. Sometimes the miracles seem like, they don't seem like miracles. You have a car, that's a miracle. You started it this morning when you wanted to go somewhere, well, that's a miracle too. The traffic worked out that you could come on time, that's also a miracle. Nothing happened on the way, that's also a miracle. So we need to work on seeing that God is taking care of us, and that recognize that even what looks like natural is also a miracle. That's how God makes the world. So things seem natural. So we could, expect to get up in the same room that we went to sleep in. That's a good thing, because then we feel stable. So everything that God is doing is for our good. Now, how do we work on this? One is having gratitude. We need to have gratitude for what God is giving us. And we need to acknowledge what God gives to us. And this strengthens our trust in God. And this is, different people do this different ways. Some people, before they go to sleep, they say 3 things they're grateful for. Some people have a notebook that they write down what they're grateful for. Different people have different ways, or saying thank you, saying Baruch Hashem, blessed is God. There are so many ways to acknowledge and be grateful that God's taking care of us. And when we do this, this strengthens our trust in God. And this also is very good for our joy, because when we say, thank you, God, I really appreciate that, then what happens is that we feel more joyful and more taken care of, and more that God is really giving us miracles all the time, that we are miracles. And when we know this and we appreciate that God is taking care of us, then we feel blessed. And this is, like I said, this is a meditation, something to work on. Meditation doesn't mean we just sit and close our eyes. It means, thank you, God. Thank you for sending a friend. Thank you for that we're all together. Thank you for whatever God is giving to us. So may we be blessed and have all revealed good.